Today's case is definitely one of the most cunning serial murder cases in history, but who would have thought? The culprit was an 11-year-old girl. She claimed to be very protective of her mother. First, she cruelly poisoned her biological father with a glass of sweet, neon green juice, helping her mother get a large sum of compensation. Then she set her sights on her stepfather. But is this really the truth? And how did a child get her hands on such a toxic juice? Wadesboro in Cayuga County, New York, USA, is a very small village. The 2020 census showed its population was only 1,788. In January 2001, a strange illness appeared in the village of Wadesboro. A 38-year-old man named Michael, who never drank alcohol, yet he felt groggy, nauseous, and vomited every day, with no trace of blood in his body. His body was also severely swollen. Michael went to the hospital for various examinations, but in the end, no cause of the disease was found. This was really strange. What was even more terrifying, after several days, Michael's condition showed no sign of improvement. His body became increasingly weak. He looked as if his soul had been completely drained. In the end, he died in confusion and was buried without knowing the real cause. 5 years after his death, another case of death from this strange illness happened, somewhere in New York State. It took only a few hours. The man died in agony. After an investigation by the police, it was found that the culprit was actually a kind of green juice. Not only that, when digging into the connection between the two deceased, it was found that both were related to 3 women. But before the police could investigate whether any of them was the killer, one of them chose to end her own life. This person was Michael's biological daughter, Ashley. Her family contacted the police for help. While waiting, they were shocked to find a suicide note nearby. Ashley wrote that she was the murderer, but she was only 11 years old when Michael died. The police initially didn't believe that a child would kill her own father, but the suicide note contained detailed records of many crime details. The reason given was that she loved her mother very much. She couldn't accept anyone hurting her mother, not even her biological father. What on earth is going on here? Let's first look at the identity information and family background of the first victim, Michael Wallace. Michael was born in 1961 and was a native of New York. In 1985, he met a beautiful woman named Stacy. In April 1990, the two got into the marriage hall. After marriage, they had 2 lovely daughters, Ashley and Bree. Many families live a happier and more harmonious life after having children, but Michael's family was different. Michael doted on his 2 children very much, but his wife always thought he was biased. She believed that no matter what he did, he favored Bree more and often ignored his eldest daughter Ashley. Michael thought these were all unfounded claims, but Stacy stuck to her opinion. She even deliberately took better care of Ashley, just to make Ashley feel favored too. Therefore, Ashley was closer to her mother since childhood. Unexpectedly, the family of 4 was divided into 2 camps. This way of getting along was quite strange, but it wouldn't have been a big problem if they had continued like this. But the biggest dilemma facing this family was actually lack of money. Although both Michael and Stacy had jobs, they didn't earn much. Daily expenses in raising children were very costly. They had to live frugally, and they lived such a tight life for more than 10 years. Stacy was really tired of living a hard life. She quarreled with Michael over trivial things. As they quarreled more and more, the relationship faded. They began to think about separating, but for the sake of their 2 daughters, they didn't choose to divorce immediately. They wanted to let the children have a good new year, so they decided to hold on for a few months before getting divorced. During this period, what did the couple do when they felt lonely? They sought comfort from others. Of course, the couple went their separate ways and didn't interfere with each other. This situation lasted for a few months, and Christmas was approaching. Unexpectedly, Michael had a major health problem. Michael explained his condition to the doctor. He said he had no bad habits, but for some reason, his stomach often felt uncomfortable. His head was also groggy, as if it was about to explode. The doctor examined him but found nothing. Without knowing the cause of the disease, there was no way to give targeted treatment. Michael could only pray for good luck, hoping that this strange disease would heal on its own. But after waiting for a few days, he fell seriously ill. On Christmas Day, the whole family gathered to have a reunion dinner. Michael's terrible sick appearance shocked his relatives and friends. Everyone urged him to go to the hospital immediately, but being anxious was useless. Without finding the cause of the disease, even the doctor could do nothing. Later, Michael's condition became critical. On January 11, 2000, he was found lying unconscious on the sofa. His family quickly sent him to the hospital, but he was pronounced dead. It should be noted that Michael was only 38 years old at that time. It was really abnormal for a man in his prime to die suddenly. Michael's sister asked the doctor to give her an explanation. The doctor guessed that it might be a heart disease. If they wanted to know the exact cause of death, the doctor suggested an autopsy. Michael's sister agreed to it, but Stacy refused. Her reason was that she believed Michael had died of a sudden illness. Once a person dies, they can't come back to life. an autopsy would damage the integrity of the body, and that would affect Michael's reincarnation. Without her permission, Michael was buried in confusion, but he had taken out an insurance policy during his lifetime. As the beneficiary, Stacy received a compensation of $55,000. This was a large sum of money. I believe by now, many people have noticed something wrong. A man who was supposed to be gone, suddenly turned into a large sum of warm money. It's reasonable to suspect that Stacy murdered her husband to defraud the insurance money. But is this really the truth? After Michael's death, Stacy used the compensation to renovate the house, providing her daughters with better living conditions. Seeing her daughters sad about their father's passing, Stacy also took them on a trip. The two daughters had never experienced anything like this before, so their moods quickly improved. As for Stacy, her relationship with Michael had already faded, so she wasn't very sad herself. She was even busy having intimate online chats with various men right after Michael's death. She even knew one of these men. She knew that this man's family was quite wealthy, and that he was a good person. So by the end of their chats, she had fallen in love with him. This man was named David Castor, who later became the second victim of an bizarre death. David was born on June 12, 1957. He owned a local air conditioning installation and repair company. His financial condition was far better than Michael's. He met Stacy and chatted with her through a dating app. The two had similar marital experiences. The difference was that David's ex-wife was still alive, and their children lived with his ex-wife. He missed the life of having a wife and children, so David had been looking for his next true love. When he learned that Stacy was widowed and was struggling to raise 2 children alone, David sincerely admired this strong woman, so he often chatted with her, and Stacy responded actively. After chatting for a few months, they decided to be together. To show his sincerity, David moved Stacy and her 2 daughters into his villa. He tried his best to satisfy their material needs. After all, David had plenty of money. In 2003, Stacy and David got married. After marriage, Ashley, who was close to her mother, accepted her stepfather, but Bree only recognized Michael as her father. She couldn't get along with David at all. But this didn't affect the good life of Stacy and her 2 daughters. They all thought this family of 4 would live happily ever after. But unexpectedly, Stacy began to quarrel with her husband frequently again, because she had been trying to control her husband's actions, but her husband didn't listen to her at all. It seemed that this marriage couldn't last either. On August 22, 2005, the local police station received an emergency call, and the caller was none other than Stacy. In a very dejected tone, she told the police that she had quarreled with her husband David the previous night. David had been so angry that he took a bottle of wine and went into the bedroom. He probably planned to drown his sorrows in alcohol again, but the problem was, it had been more than 7 hours since David got into the room. She had knocked on the door for a long time, but there was no sound from inside. Fearing something bad had happened, she asked the police to come over quickly. After some time, the police arrived and forced the door open. As soon as they walked in, they saw David lying naked on the bed. They stepped forward to check and found that David was already dead. When Stacy heard the news, she cried uncontrollably. She also said she believed her husband had taken his own life because he couldn't cope with his problems. But the police hadn't even started their investigation yet. How could she be so sure that David had committed suicide? Stacy explained that they were a blended family. David had originally been very optimistic about their relationship, but recently, the couple had been quarreling every day due to disagreements. David's mental state had already been very bad. Unexpectedly, he had received another piece of bad news a few days earlier. His beloved father had passed away. The loss of his father and the troubles in his relationship had become the last straw that broke David. When David's son and ex-wife arrived after hearing the news, they also thought David had probably committed suicide, because they had met him a few days earlier, and found that he looked very haggard. Although everyone thought this way, the police still needed to conduct an investigation to find out the real cause of David's death. During the on-site investigation, they found there was a wine bottle, a bottle of juice, and 2 glasses on David's bedside table. The wine bottle and the cranberry juice bottle were already empty. One of the 2 glasses still contained about half a cup of green juice, but cranberry juice wasn't this color at all. Then the police continued their search and found an opened bottle of antifreeze on the floor, with its contents spilled all over the carpet. It was exactly the same color as the green liquid in the glass. It seemed that David had probably drunk this substance. But is car antifreeze toxic? In fact, antifreeze is very toxic. Accidental ingestion or extensive skin contact can cause very serious consequences. Among these, accidental ingestion is the most dangerous. The main component of antifreeze is ethylene glycol. It has a sweet taste. After getting into the human body, it's metabolized in the liver into acetaldehyde, oxalic acid, glycolic acid, and other substances. These substances are all harmful and can damage the heart, kidneys, nervous system, and other organs. The initial symptoms are similar to being drunk. Symptoms include dizziness, headache, and nausea. Subsequent symptoms include kidney failure, heart failure, and so on. It can be said that the mortality rate is very high. After an autopsy, the forensic doctor found that David died of ethylene glycol poisoning. The antifreeze bottle was right there, so David couldn't have ingested it by accident. Combined with what Stacy, David's ex-wife, and his son had said, the forensic doctor naturally concluded that the deceased had committed suicide. I wonder if anyone has thought of something regarding the antifreeze poisoning symptoms described above. These strange symptoms perfectly match the way Michael died. It's obvious that there's something wrong here, but because Stacy and her 2 daughters had moved, the local police station wasn't aware of this. The case was almost closed as a suicide. When the police suddenly discovered something strange, David had made a will before his death. It emphasized that all his belongings should be given to Stacy and her 2 daughters. His ex-wife and son would get nothing. This was very unreasonable. Although David had fallen out with his ex-wife, he still had a good relationship with his son as before. Moreover, the father and son often met up. Even if David favored Stacy and her daughters more, he couldn't have left nothing to his biological son. With this doubt, the police continued their investigation. In fact, the police did find many suspicious points during the on-site evidence collection and subsequent investigation. First, Stacy reported to the police that David was drinking alone in his room to drown his sorrows. When they got into the room, they found that the wine bottle was indeed empty, but the forensic doctor later examined the body and found that there wasn't much alcohol residue in David's body. Second, Stacy's fingerprints were actually found on the glass that contained the antifreeze, but Stacy explained this. She said that after her husband took the wine into the room, she had tried to comfort him. At that time, David hadn't yet locked the door from the inside, so Stacy went in and poured him a glass of cranberry juice, leaving her fingerprints on the glass in the process. Later, David presumably used the same glass to drink the antifreeze. Third, there was vomit under the antifreeze bottle, but the bottle itself was clean. If David had really drunk the antifreeze by himself, would he have deliberately moved the bottle away when vomiting, then put it back after vomiting? As for the last suspicious point, the police searched other parts of the villa. Finally, they found a dropper in the kitchen trash can. This was a super large rubber-tipped dropper. When grilling meat, a lot of oil is produced. This tool can be used to suck out the oil and drizzle it back on the meat, saving the trouble of brushing oil, and there was also green liquid inside it. So the police immediately sent the item for testing to see if it contained antifreeze. If it did, it was highly likely that David hadn't committed suicide, because if he had already drunk the antifreeze from a glass, why would he need to use a shabby dropper to pour it into his stomach? Moreover, if David had really used it, he wouldn't even bother to pick up the antifreeze bottle, so why would he take the trouble to go to the kitchen to throw away the dropper after using it? It's reasonable to suspect that someone, while David was unconscious, used the dropper to feed him antifreeze, then poured the antifreeze into a glass to fake a suicide. The police were most suspicious of Stacy and immediately investigated her past. They guessed that Michael had also most likely died from antifreeze poisoning. So the police launched an undercover investigation into Stacy and installed surveillance cameras near her home. They even installed wiretaps and didn't even spare the cemetery. But Stacy actually made things easier for the police. She had actually buried her 2 ex-husbands in the same cemetery plot, and they were even buried next to each other. She said she actually loved both men. Burying them together would save her a lot of trouble when visiting. But over the course of 2 years, Stacy never came to visit even once. Perhaps she never thought the police would install surveillance at the cemetery, so she didn't even bother to pretend. Moreover, with David's money, Stacy lived a carefree and happy life. It gave people the impression that what she loved wasn't the men themselves, but their money. During these 2 years, the forensic lab finally reached a conclusion. The substance in the dropper was antifreeze, and it contained David's DNA and Stacy's fingerprints. This required a thorough investigation. The police exhumed Michael's body. The examination revealed that he had also been poisoned to death by antifreeze. Although there was evidence, it wasn't enough to immediately convict Stacy, because all the evidence the police had was circumstantial. So they tried to put pressure on Stacy to make her confess under the pressure. So the police contacted Ashley. During their meeting, they told her that Michael and David had been poisoned to death by Stacy, but Ashley didn't believe them at all. She believed her mother was the person who loved her the most in the world. After the police left, Ashley contacted her mother without hesitation and told her everything that had happened. Stacy flew into a rage after hearing this. She yelled that the police were talking nonsense. Late at night, she went to Ashley and said she was in a bad mood. She hoped Ashley would accompany her for a drink. Ashley was super obedient to her mother, so she drank with her all night. As a result, she didn't wake up until noon the next day. But soon after waking up, Her mother handed her a brightly colored cocktail, saying she had prepared it carefully, and asked Ashley to taste it. Ashley took a sip and said she didn't like it. Stacy looked very disappointed. To comfort her mother, Ashley frowned and drank the whole cocktail. A few hours later, Bree came home and asked her mother where Ashley was. Her mother said Ashley was asleep after getting drunk, so Bree didn't say anything more. The next day, when Bree passed by Ashley's room, she heard strange gasping sounds coming from inside, so she hurried in to check, and found Ashley in a half-dead state. Stacy said this was normal after getting drunk. Bree still felt something was wrong, and asked her mother to call 911 immediately. Stacy did make the call. When the call connected, she said Ashley had just drunk a lot of alcohol. As she was talking, her tone suddenly became flustered. She said there was actually a suicide note on her daughter's bed. She read it from beginning to end, then exclaimed that it was impossible. She couldn't believe her daughter was a murderer. Soon after, an ambulance and police cars arrived at the villa. They found multiple empty wine bottles beside Ashley's bed, and a simple search also turned up some pills. This combination was just as dangerous as taking cephalosporins with alcohol. The medical staff gave Ashley first aid, then immediately took her to the hospital for emergency treatment. The police, but stayed behind to examine the suicide note. Incredibly, the suicide note was actually printed from an electronic version. It had been printed using the family's computer and printer. The content said that Ashley didn't regret killing Michael and David. She really wanted to protect her mother. The following part described the detailed method of the crimes. It even included many details that the police had discovered during the investigation but not made public, and she mentioned all of them. Finally, Ashley wrote that she felt she was a sinner. Although she had no regrets, she couldn't bear the torment in her heart, so she chose to end her own life. But then a dramatic turn of events happened. Ashley survived after emergency treatment, and she even woke up successfully. The police immediately questioned her about the suicide note. Ashley was stunned. After thinking for a long time, she realized that her mother had set her up. Her mother had cruelly killed her two husbands, and to find someone to take the blame, she had even tried to kill her own daughter, who trusted her the most. If Bree hadn't noticed that something was wrong with her sister, Stacy would have actually succeeded. But why did the police believe that Ashley was telling the truth? They investigated the time when the suicide note was drafted and printed. To their surprise, they found that at that time, the police were right beside Ashley, talking to her, telling her that Michael and David had been poisoned by Stacy. How could she have written and printed the note when she wasn't even at home? This meant that Stacy had long planned to make her daughter a scapegoat. It was only the pressure from the police that made her speed up her plan. Of course, Stacy also made a fatal mistake. She had a unique habit when spelling the word antifreeze. She liked to add a hyphen in the middle of it. This could be seen in her interviews, and the word antifreeze in the suicide note was spelled with this same mistake. Now the truth was clear. The police immediately arrested Stacy at the hospital. They originally wanted to charge her with the murder of her two husbands and the attempted murder of Ashley, but Michael's case had happened too many years ago, and collecting evidence was very difficult. They didn't want to give Stacy time to delay the case, so they quickly charged her with second-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder. In 2009, Stacy was brought to court. This time, the mother and daughter completely fell out. Ashley accused her mother of trying to kill her by giving her spiked alcohol just to get herself out of trouble, and she also accused her mother of forging the suicide note to frame her. In addition to Ashley taking the initiative to testify, her younger sister Bree also testified. She testified that, after she noticed something was wrong with her sister, her mother had been making excuses and refusing to call the police. The prosecution also presented the evidence they had collected. First, there was antifreeze residue in Michael's body. If he had committed suicide, there would have been no need for him to go to the hospital repeatedly for treatment. He had suffered from the illness for a long time before he died, and after his death, Stacy had been preventing an autopsy. In the end, she successfully got the insurance money and lived a carefree life. This was clearly a case of murdering her husband for insurance money. Second, the dropper found in the trash can also contained antifreeze. David's DNA was found on one end of the dropper tube, and Stacy's fingerprints were found on the rubber cap. Third, David had clearly not drunk much alcohol before his death, but Stacy had lied, claiming that her husband had been trying to drown his sorrows in alcohol. She had implied to the police that her husband had suicidal tendencies. After the police arrived, they conducted an investigation at the crime scene. They found that the wine bottles were empty. It was obvious that they had been deliberately emptied. Fourth, Ashley hadn't written that suicide note at all, so someone had used her computer to forge the note, and that person was Stacy. Because the police had called another witness, she claimed to be Stacy's good friend. During the time when the suicide note was written, she was on the phone with Stacy. Stacy had told her she was at home, and the friend clearly heard the sound of keyboard typing. An investigation of the call records confirmed that the friend was indeed on the phone with Stacy during that period, but Stacy said the friend was lying. She claimed she hadn't used the computer at all that day, and said the friend's accusation was a blatant slander. She also refused to admit to the spelling mistake. Fifth, There was a problem with David's will. As a wealthy man of some means, it wasn't unusual for him to have made a will early. Stacy took advantage of this, and had someone change the will ahead of time. The person who changed the will was also her good friend. Now this friend also came forward as a witness to accuse Stacy. The witness said that David wasn't stupid. His son was his biological child after all, so he had left most of his money to his son, an amount sufficient to ensure his son would live comfortably for the rest of his life. But Stacy coveted this money. She didn't want to share it with anyone else, so she didn't hesitate to have the will altered. Sixth, in fact, before contacting Ashley, the police had also called Stacy. In an attempt to catch her off guard and expose her lies, the police asked her to recount the incident of pouring the juice again. But for some reason, perhaps nervousness, Stacy began to say, "When I poured the she immediately realized her mistake and was shocked. Thinking she must have lost her mind, she quickly lied, saying she couldn't forget the substance that had killed her husband, which was why she had slipped up. Fearing the police would continue to press her, she even accused the police of being desperate to solve the case quickly, claiming they were trying to deliberately coerce her into confessing. After that, she angrily asked the police to leave. It's believed that it was at this point she came up with the idea of making Ashley her scapegoat. After reading this, one can't help but say that Stacy is a truly vicious woman. She actually poisoned almost all the people close to her for money. It's no wonder that people later called this case the Black Widow case. But in the face of so much evidence, Stacy still refused to admit her guilt. She swore fiercely, shouting that she was innocent, claiming that Ashley was the real murderer, saying Ashley had forged all the evidence to frame her own mother. What is even more dramatic, Stacy even brought in a witness. This witness was her own mother, Ashley, and Bree's grandmother. But the grandmother was too funny. She had no evidence to support her claims. She immediately said that everything was Ashley's doing, claiming Ashley had committed the murders, and Stacy had nothing to do with it. Now, evidence from both sides had been presented. The jury held intense discussions. After 4 days, they finally reached a verdict. They found Stacy guilty of second-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder, and sentenced her to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 51 years. It should be noted that Stacy was already in her 40s at that time. To be eligible for parole, she would first have to live to be over 90 years old. But in 2016, Stacy died of cardiac arrest, which can be said to be a fitting end for her crimes. Let's analyze Stacy's criminal psychology below. The most obvious factor is that she had had enough of a hard life, and was driven by economic interests. She began to use evil means to murder her husband for insurance money. Later, driven by greed, she changed all wills to transfer all assets to her own name. When she learned that most of David's inheritance was left to his son, it most likely triggered strong resentment in Stacy. Recalling that her first murder of her husband had gone undetected, she developed a sense of luck. She thought she could get away with it again. Moreover, Stacy was completely heartless. She killed her husband, who she had lived with day and night, without hesitation. She could also abandon her own daughter, whom she had given birth to and raised. It's obvious that she lacked a sense of morality and empathy. As for why she wasn't close to her younger daughter, personally, I think it's highly likely that the younger daughter wasn't easy to control. Judging from Bree's insistence that her mother call for help, she's a person with strong independent thinking. She wasn't like her elder sister, who only obeyed obediently. Therefore, Stacy most likely also thought about sacrificing her. But considering that the younger daughter was disobedient and easy to cause changes, she finally chose to target her elder daughter instead. She just didn't expect that her elder daughter would wake up after emergency treatment. What do you think about this? If you like my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe.